What is going on? Welcome back to another episode of It's a Blast podcast. My name is Mike, also known as the EOD Happy Captain on X. Today, I'm talking to Sergeant First Class retired Jeff Dawson. He's a Distinguished Service Cross recipient and multiple Purple Heart recipient. Today, we're talking about valor under fire, getting wounded in combat, and his journey in behavioral health. If you like the content that I'm producing, please follow along, like, and subscribe. Let's get started. Welcome to the It's a Blast podcast. My name is Mike. Here, I talk to members of the veteran and military community about their leadership style and how the military has affected their lives. Let's get started. What is going on? I am sitting down with Jeff Dawson, a Distinguished Service Cross recipient and EOD technician. Brother, what is going on? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's good to see you again. I just saw you at Fort Liberty, I think is what it's called now, a couple weeks back. But wanted to sit down and, have a conversation about your time in EOD, your time, where you were awarded a Distinguished Service Cross, right? And how life is going now. But I think in order to get there, we got to start at the beginning, which is the same question I pretty much ask everybody, right? Which is, why did you join the Army to start with?
Yeah, man. So I was living in Reno. It was back in 2008. I signed up for school. I couldn't afford it. I couldn't afford the book just for that one class that I signed up for. And so I basically was running out of options. I was working like 2 or 3 jobs at the time, just barely being able to pay my bills. And I was hanging out with a couple guys prior to me joining, and they were in the Marine Corps. And I kind of mentioned to them that I was thinking about maybe joining the military. No one else in my family really, except for my brother was in the Navy. He was a nuclear physics professor in the Navy. But as far as my immediate family, no one else has been in the military or had any like drive to be in the military. So I was talking to them about joining the military and kind of what my options were. And so we talked about going to uh, well, I went and took the SFAB and kind of came back with um, a list of jobs that I qualified for, and basically EOD was on there. And so I talked to him about kind of what the jobs that were on the list, kind of what they were, and immediately basically just said like, hey, EOD, that's the one you want to do, because my buddy was an engineer. Juan, I was actually living with him right before I joined the Army, and it was just a really uh, tough place to be in. I was not making very much money. It was just a kind of a hard life. I had no like
Yeah.
nothing really looking to look forward to. So I figured maybe the military would give me a good opportunity to learn and grow. So I
Did
joined.
you know, you said you talked to him, he was an engineer about EOD. Did you know fully what it was before you got to school, or was it kind of one of those things where you got there and you're like, oh shit, this is like bomb defusal?
No, they talked to me quite a bit about it. That I would be dealing with explosives and explosive devices. And I kind of really just thought of it as an opportunity to challenge myself, mentally and physically. So that's kind of I looked into it a little bit more, and plus it came with a $40,000 bonus at the time, so I was like couldn't really complain
Oh
about
yeah.
that. But they were also giving $40,000 bonuses to truck drivers too in Iraq in 2008, if you can imagine why. So
Yeah, no, I came in 08 as well, and those 88 mics, those truck drivers, yeah, they were getting big dollars. As a matter of fact, my recruiter tried to push me to be an 88 mic. Not
yeah,
that there's anything wrong with that, but definitely not for me, but I I remember going to EOD school and just being like, dude, what am I doing here? So I came in as an 18 X-ray, and it didn't go well, right? So I didn't make it through selection, and I went back to, brag at the time, and the cadre member was like, hey man, you should go EOD, and I had no idea what it was. So I literally like showed up to phase 1 EOD school at Redstone Arsenal, and I was like, oh, holy shit, this is like dealing with explosives and stuff. And like I loved it, right? But I had quite a bit of times in school where I was like, I'm not making it through this. I think I was in ground division. And so for those listening or watching, EOD school is broken down into 8 separate subsections. One of those is ground ordnance division. And I failed every testing ground, like literally every single test. I single tapped, and I was like, I'm not making it out of this school alive. And then, of course, I never failed another test after that. But yeah, man, I think EOD was a smart choice. What unit did you wind up at after graduation?
I ended up with 722nd on this company out here out of Bragg as well. But real
Nice.
quick, let me back up. So going through EOD school was kind of I showed up and man, it was like we get to Redstone, right? And it's like the first test. I can't even remember what it was, but it was basically just like uh, I want to say it was just
Was that the basic word ID test, or was
it
that
wasn't even that. It was just like verbiage. I think.
like the words, like the safeties? The
I
safeties,
think it was
right?
probably safe, something like that. It was just a really, really
Yeah.
stupid, easy test, which I failed. Um, and and that was a really great way to start off the uni school. But I ended up that just hit me so hard. Like, man, I'm screwing up. This early, I'm failing tests. Like that's not cool. Nowadays, if you fail the first test, they just kick you out.
Yeah.
Of phase
Yeah, yeah.
one. So, but I failed the very first test in phase one at Redstone Arsenal, and I actually didn't fail another test until aircraft explosive hazards in air, in Grant.
Get out of here, dude.
Yeah,
That was my
and
that's what I taught for like the last 2 years.
dude, but what the crazy part about it is I didn't even score below like a 90, I think, on anything
Yeah.
until I failed, and then
No.
I double tap AHs, and then I go to the training officer and he puts me back in a class and then I pass and then I go into bomb or guided missiles next was the next section and I double tap that. And on my double tap, I knew that I had screwed up and it was the first time in school that,
Yeah.
it wasn't worst case scenario. Like they told you, hey, this was dropped during transportation.
Yeah.
Like, duh, it's unarmed, kind of thing. And, uh, basically I went back to my instructor and said, hey, um, she was an Air Force civilian instructor at the time, and I said, hey, like I really screwed this up, but I'm just gonna go ahead and start over. She still failed me, but I took that information to my academic review board, who the Divo at the time, his name now Lieutenant Colonel Wallace. Was a division officer in air at the time, and basically he had a conversation with me. He said, "Hey, maybe you go away now." I was PFC at the time. Maybe you go away and come back as an E4 and E5 in a couple years, and see because right now this just isn't seem like it's for you. So uh, Captain Wallace at the time shows up to my academic review board and has a conversation with my board members prior to me going in there, and so I basically go in, I salute to the president of the board. Uh, and basically they looked at me and said, "We're gonna drop you, but go ahead and have a seat, and we'll see how this goes." And so I sat down and just kind of reverted back to basic training. I sat at the position of attention and just addressed each person on the board. They asked me why I messed up, or what I was thinking, why I screwed up, and I basically walked them through the fuse functioning and the safe and arm package of that specific piece of ordnance and how it hadn't basically sustained enough
Arm up, yeah.
G forces to arm, and they're looking at me like,
Yeah.
"Why is this dude failing?" So they ended up putting me back in class, and I didn't fail. The only test I failed after that was one test. So I failed 5 tests,
Yeah.
actually 6 if you count phase one, 6 tests through all of UT school. But graduating from EOD school, I went to I got stationed here in North Carolina, and with the 722nd EOD Company, and we were supposed to be going to Iraq in 2010 timeframe, which is right after shortly after I got there, but our orders kept getting deferred and deferred, and we ended up actually eventually going to Iraq in 2011. We weren't really sure if we were going to be staying But we ended up staying an extra 6 months after, at the end of that rotation so we stayed there for over a year in Iraq, from 11 to 12, and then, came back from that, and the unit's telling me that they were going to work on my team leader certifications and get me to the board to go to the E6 promotion board. And they sent me to JRTC, and it was just, I don't know, man. I
Yeah.
felt like I needed more. You talked about Mike Vining just as we were starting up, and like I had a picture of Mike Vining in the platoon office just hanging up.
Yeah.
That classic one
Our Lord and
in his
Savior.
dress uniform. And that was just yeah, right. That was just an inspiration, for me to want to do better and want to progress in my career. And so, I was talking with one of my buddies, Nate. He was in 722nd with me. We deployed to Iraq together, and kind of just decided that we should try out for the 28th together. And I had recently just gotten married, when I got back from Iraq, to my wife Trish, and I kind of
Yeah.
wanted some stability. Uh, and the 28th offered that to me. Like the 28th offered me an opportunity to
Yeah.
stay
For
here for
those
a little
that
bit longer on station, before getting PCS.
for those that don't know what the 28th is, can you kind of give a quick what is the 28th as a unit?
Yeah, so the 28th EOD is an airborne special operations EOD unit, in the Army, and basically they, support, Ranger Regiment and other special operations units, and provide EOD support for them in the capacity of like direct action and, like direct action raids and stuff, and just kind of
Yeah.
like, uh, I liked it because it was very very minimalistic kind of, um, gear that you ran. You had to constantly be thinking outside of the box to kind of to accomplish all of your goals and your mission and stuff. So I, I really liked that part of the unit, and I really enjoyed our customer that we supported, the Ranger
Yeah.
Regiment. I really enjoyed working with those guys. They were, uh, incredibly professional and, just an awesome group of guys, man.
No, 100%, man. I mean, so you decide to make the transition over to the 28th. I mean, there's an assessment and selection associated with that, correct?
There is.
Okay. And so you wind up at the 28th, still pretty, in 2011, a newer unit that had just been
Yeah.
established. Um, and so was that, I mean, like, was that the right choice at the right time, going from a conventional unit over on Fort Bragg at the time to that?
Yeah. Um, I came over in 2013 to the 28th, so it was a little bit after, 2011, but, I think it was a good opportunity for me. I know it's hard. It's hard for some people, depending on, because we're kind of in this weird spot, or at least we were before. But I mean, it's kind of like it's developed and kind of, shifted in a little bit over the years. But, um, I kind of noticed, a little bit about like some of the new guys. When I was going through school, we didn't actually allow, initial entry soldiers to, assess for the platoon because it's a special operations unit. They wanted combat experience. They wanted all this other experience. But one of the things I kind of noticed, after getting there was that like some of these guys that had been in EOD units before or for a period of time before, like they had so many bad habits, you
Yeah.
know, and you have to be able, and sometimes you get tunnel vision, like on the fact that you need to take care of the problem, and sometimes that's not the job. That's not the job. That's not the end state, like maybe sometimes the end state is to avoid the device so we can get our guys to where we're going safely. Like that's kind of,
Yeah. Do a mark and bypass type of deal.
yeah. And it's not that you're trying to you don't want to deal with it. It's just a different mindset. It's a different concept entirely, and a lot of guys just had a really hard time taking their foot off the throttle and being like, I don't need to pursue this. First of all, it's dangerous, and I have no gear other than like a rope and some hook and line
Yeah.
tools. Um, so and a metal detector, and you really just don't have um, the tools to take care of something like that with safely if it's not like if the situation doesn't warrant. So I like being able to have to think outside of the box and move quickly and just allow things to kind of develop. It was a
Yeah.
really awesome experience for me.
So let's talk about, uh, the mission. All right. Let's talk about the mission for which you were awarded Distinguished Service Cross.
Yeah,
All
man.
right. And so we're talking, October 2013. So you're still pretty new to the unit, correct?
Yeah, that was my first deployment with them.
Yeah. And so, I've read the citation. I've actually posted it, on X before for people to take a look at and, kind of talk about it. But let's walk through it because there's a lot of moving parts and pieces on this mission.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Um, yeah, it was just this guy that we were going after in Afghanistan. It was basically he had two areas that he could be at. So we split our force, the platoon. We split our force, and one EOD tech went to where I was at, and the other EOD tech, because we were running two EOD techs per strike force at the time. The other EOD tech went to the other NAI, named area of interest, and uh, it was like the threat was really low. It was not. It was just. It was supposed to be like just a quick, let's get there, get back kind of mission. Um, and so everything was just normal, just like every other mission that we go out on, and we land there, and uh, there was a little bit of confusion on the ground at first, but I found myself like just up north um, on an interdiction element, and and then there was back down south where the rest there was the other half of our half element was at. Basically started taking contact in the form of a suicide vest. And
Yeah.
what I had come to realize, so I basically I got on the net and said, "Hey, what's going on? Is this us?" And it was silent. Uh, so we continued to push forward north after with the interdiction team, and the it was kind of blurry, to be honest with you. There was so much going on, but there was more detonations on the back of the compound, and I said, I basically was saying, hey, like we need to get back there now. But we were really close to this guy that we were chasing after, and the dog was on a 30-foot lead, and basically jumps on this guy, and he detonates himself about 15 feet in front of us, uh, which one something probably a ball bearing of some sort or a rock grazed the inside of my thigh, and so we all kind of returned fire immediately. It's just an immediate reaction, and uh, kind of try to figure out what was going on there. I ended up grabbing one of the team leaders and telling him that we were not going to pursue the site where the detonation was, because I mean there was detonations going back of the compound. I figured that maybe they were baiting us into something else.
Right.
Being like there's a ton of vegetation in this wadi, like a canal, and it was kind of really hard to see in there. I didn't even see the guy before he blew himself up. And so after that, the guy ended up killing the dog, so we had no more canine on the ground, and I was the only EOD guy. And there were still detonations going on the
And so,
ground.
like, when we
So
talk when we talk canines, I mean, dual purpose, right? For those that
right,
are listening, so bite and explosive detection.
right,
And so, I mean, it's a huge asset for an EOD tech to have on the ground when we're talking
sure,
about finding IEDs that are there, right?
yeah,
And in the case of this story, we're talking a lot of IEDs that were there.
yes, yeah, there was a lot. So we basically gathered the remains from the dog and made our way back to the compound. I got checked out by one of the PJ that was on the ground with us. Because of my leg, I felt something wet on the inside of my pants, so I like basically cut open my pants and checked to make sure that I wasn't bleeding from like my femoral
Yeah.
artery, and I was good. So we made our way back to the compound, and just initially, like coming up to the compound, I noticed that there was like a hole, like a blast seat, where a detonation had gone off, and I was hearing some stuff over the net, like maybe that they were taking a direct fire, possibly. But when I got there, I noticed wires coming out of the ground from one of the detonation sites, and that just really stuck out weird to me because I mean, typically, if you have an IED and it's powered by like a pressure plate or something like that, the pressure plate is generally like on top of the main charge. So when you step on it, it gets rid of all the evidence and everything. But there was nothing like that here. It was just wires that came out, and it really kind of reminded me of like a range day. You know, when you go to set off
Hmm.
your electric systems, those wires, they don't disappear. You know, they're not consumed in the detonation. They just kind of get flung out,
Yeah.
uh, and that's kind of what it looked like for those like blasting cap lead wires. And so that just hit me really weird. And so I told people that they weren't mortars. I basically got on the net and told everyone to not move at that point. And so when I got on site, I realized that four people at this point had stepped on pressure plates, and three of them were at this point KIA. One was still alive, and there was a medic working on him, who eventually actually ended up expiring uh, 30 minutes or so later.
Yeah.
He just due to wounds, man. It was bad. So, but I got there. I noticed that he was the only one that was still alive. So we started clearing a route, and I got the PJ that was with our element to him to work with the medic on that casualty, because the other ones that were initially hit by the suicide vest that did not make it on the medevac, they were stable in condition, and they were just basically people were just hanging out with them to check on them and make sure that they didn't need anything until the next medevac could come in. Uh, so I got I cleared that casualty. I came back to the casualty collection point and basically started clearing to more casualties. I cleared to Cody Patterson and basically recovered his remains and got him back to the CCP. On my way to Jenny Moreno, I found like three, like I was clearing with my metal detector and I'm finding wires, covered wires under the ground that were going to main charges, and I'm kind of putting this together as I'm going,
Yeah.
with the wires coming out of the ground, and then finding not main charges but wires in the ground. I'm kind of starting to put together the way that this whole thing is like set up. So I fired three or so IEDs on my way to the next casualty, and I basically notified the platoon sergeant that what I was finding, and he just said, stop, like let's clear a route out of here first before we start getting too deep into this right now. There's a bunch of casualties we have right here on the X. But because I was clearing out to her, and then after the third one that I found, I was on my knees, and we were running a white light at this point, so we had close air support just flying around, ready to burn down anything that was around us, and we were just literally a compound in the middle of the desert. There was nothing
Yeah.
out. So I was on my knees, and I remember taking my flashlight and like looking out in front of me at the ground level, and I could just see mounds everywhere, probably like 40 mounds, like just everywhere around, probably like 40 main charges, 40 IEDs
Yeah.
that uh, that I could just see with my eyes. But we had no reason to ever go over and confirm them. So basically, once I told the platoon sergeant that, he's like, "Hey, let's get out of here." You know, not let's get out of here. Let's clear us a route so we can start pulling
Right.
casualties off the X. You know, and so I cleared a route out, and I cleared an HLZ for the helicopter to come in and do the medevacs, and on
I
my
mean, we're
way,
we're talking, we're talking how many IDs had you found at this point confirmed? I mean, I know we talked about the 40 mounds and you're in an IED belt, but I mean,
yes.
how many of you at this point, you know,
At, so
confirmed via wires?
at this point, still only three. I mean,
Okay.
that I basically I found with my metal detector, and I was able to uncover the wires for it. Uh, I really only had to do the first one for that, but once I found the wire, I could trace that kind of wire, or that path that the wire was going on, because I knew kind of, when I was putting it together, I knew kind of like how it was working. Like there was a center wire that went down, and they were basically wiring off IEDs on either side of that center wire. So everything was powered by one battery, uh, and everything. I mean, everything out there was set to basically as an individual IED, all tied into the belt.
So you're 5 to 7 feet away from an IED detonation. I mean, so, your eardrums are ringing, your equipment is literally damaged from a blast. I mean, how do you keep operating in that type of situation, when your bell is obviously wrong?
So honestly, man, basically you're gonna revert back to your training, your lowest, I mean your baseline training, and that's gonna kick in as muscle memory. You do things repetitive for a reason, so your muscle memory is gonna kick in. I remember when that specific detonation went off, I was making my way back to the casualty collection point after clearing my route to the HLZ,
Yeah.
and I remember it being I had like the summer peltors, so I had one of my earbuds out so I could communicate with people that were in my vicinity, and I could also know what was going on with the net. Uh, because the peltors, when you key them, you can't hear someone when they're talking right next to you. So I had one of my earbuds out, and I was um, I was walking, and uh, this detonation goes off, and I just remember it being like, it was really hot for a second, and I don't remember really hearing a sound because immediately my eardrum was ruptured from the blast wave. But I remember feeling really hot. It was really hot for a second, and then all the pain hit me at once, and then my adrenaline just spiked. And I remember it kind of like pushed me to the side, and I kind of like stumbled to a knee, and I knew exactly what had happened. So I got on the net immediately, and I just said, "Everybody, stop fucking moving."
Yeah.
And I got up, and I basically walked to the platoon sergeant, and I knew that I had gotten hit pretty bad on my left torso. So I asked him if I was okay. he asked if I could breathe, and then basically instructed me to go start helping with Hargis. So I run over to Hargis and I started putting a tourniquet. I grabbed the tourniquet off of his kit and put it around his leg, and I cinched it down. And as I started tightening the windlass, the buckle broke. And I just looked at the medic, and he said, "Put pressure right here." He
You're
said, "Put
good.
pressure." He said, "Put pressure right here." So I put pressure on his femorals, and he grabbed tourniquets and put tourniquets on his legs, and got him all packaged up. Once I was good to go from that, I kind of like at, around this time that the other guy had expired, and the PJ made his way back to us at this point, and he helped the medic package up Hargis. And I kind of just was like, this is my second detonation for the night. Ruptured eardrum. I was like bleeding from my ear. I was having a hard time hearing people. And basically, I was just started. I was there. We were all kind of like in a huddle right there, and I was on my knee, and I just started uncovering like a bundle of wires. And the platoon sergeant asked, "Is that an IED?" And I told him it didn't make sense for an IED to be right there. And basically, he told me that QRF was going to be there in a couple minutes, and that he had already lost enough people that night,
Yeah.
and for me to just like kind of just stop because I couldn't hear, I couldn't, like I'd already got my bell rung twice, and I think he was thinking at this point, I mean, I could have been potentially like, uh,
Not mentally
flaccid.
sound to yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
just what happens after a detonation, man. So,
Yeah.
um, but I was still, it was like, this doesn't make any sense to me for there to be an IED right here, which, but QRF comes in a couple minutes later, and I basically like walked them on, my route that I cleared out. So they got a guy on each side, and they made the route wider so they could
Yeah.
fit more people in there. And that was our route that we used for the objectives for the rest of the night. So after that, I started, I basically did a handover with my platoon sergeant, the EOD platoon sergeant, Sergeant First Class Tedesco, and Crockett was the other EOD tech that came in from that. And I basically like, so
I was just gonna say, I mean, you wind up three confirmed, victim operated IEDs, six more suspected devices, over 10 detonations on the scene, multiple KIA. And I kind of wanted to take a minute to kind of key people into that, right? Because we're talking through this scenario, and you're just talking about it in such a matter of fact way. Um, but like, holy shit, dude! You went and recovered one of your teammates, right? Uh, you were applying, tactical casualty combat care on the ground. You were wounded twice. Uh, I think that can't be overstated enough. Is that like, dude, you saved lives on the ground. You were out there finding IEDs. It's incredible. When you read the citation and just to hear you kind of talk about it in such a like a matter of fact, like, hey, this happened, then that happened, but like, holy shit, dude. You know, you went and recovered the remains of Patterson. You went and cleared up to several people so that they could be taken to the casualty collection point so that their remains could be recovered. Uh, it's incredible, dude. And you're on the ground for what? How long are you on the ground for? I mean, this is hours.
I don't even remember exactly how long, but I think it was about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I mean after basically I did the handover with the platoon sergeant. I started clearing blocking positions. So like I went out and I'm like clearing with my metal detector to just start bringing more people back in so we can prep them for exfil. So kind of around that time, basically once I got the one of the DPs back and some of the other stragglers that were kind of just didn't want to, they were just holding their space because they didn't want to move because there's detonations going everywhere. Um, once I got those guys back to the main body, that's when they first wanted to look at me from a medical standpoint. So they asked if the medic had looked at me. I said no. So basically, I went over and allowed the medic to check me out, and he said, "Hey, you're going to be on the next bird out of here." I fought that for a period of time, but they basically came back with it's non-negotiable. You're leaving. Um, and so at that point, I was like, I prepped for exfil and helped carry casualties onto the bird. Um, and then that was
So
pretty
you had
much the end.
mentioned, yeah, you had mentioned, first detonation, you wind up taking a ball bearing or a rock to the thigh, and then that second detonation where you knew that your back was hurt. I mean, what injury was sustained?
Let's see. I had a ruptured eardrum and basically just fragmentation wounds to my upper torso, both arms, and my side. My side. I had some just basically rocks, kind of
Yeah.
all over my body. It was kind of around my ear, down my arm, and then down my torso. I mean, my kit got protected some of it. But I mean, they spent about 2 hours like picking rocks out of me when I got back. After that, I never went to the roll 3 or anything. I never went to the hospital to be seen. But I had obviously a concussion. I like the doctor called my wife about a week later or something like that, 2 weeks later, and basically said that I had fragmentation wounds, irregular pupil dilation. I had a concussion, and then he said I was pretty banged up, but I was stable, which was like I don't even know why they called her, but so the next time she talked to me, she's like, "What is going on right now, dude? Like this guy just called me. Like what in the world, you know?" So um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's Jesus. And so you like you, I don't think anybody at this point would have judged you, after that mission if you were like, "You know what, man, thanks. That was a good time. I'm done." But you wind up going back and deploying again, correct?
that was my first of 7 deployments with the unit.
Yeah. So 7 deployments, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
and
and then you wind
there
up,
was no shortage of situations after that either. It just, I
yeah,
mean, inherently working with the special operations community and working with the Ranger Regiment, there's going to be like situations along the way where, I mean, we take the fight to the enemy every single night, and
yeah,
shit happens, and like,
right,
and there's firefights and there's casualties, and there was no
yeah.
shortage of that stuff after that first deployment. But yeah,
I mean, how does that, how do you mentally get over that, and I'm not sure, one, we ever really can, but two, like, how do you, I guess the question I'm asking is, how do you shake it off after a deployment where you're wounded multiple times, there's multiple KIAs on the ground, this is your first deployment with the unit. I'm going to suspect that the conventional unit deployment that you had to Iraq probably wasn't as kinetic. And so how do you like shake it off and say, you know what, I'm ready to go back for round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7? I mean, like, is that a conscious effort, or do you just kind of drive through that?
that was honestly just a really dark time in my life, man. I ended up started drinking a lot after that. I came back from that deployment. I really didn't have any time to decompress. I went straight into ALC for my NCO academy course. So I went from that deployment to being TDY for like 2.5 months, and then went straight back into a training cycle. There was no time to stop and think about what was next. It was like, this is my job. I have to continue doing this. This is what I
Yeah.
signed up for. Like, and uh, other than that, man, you take uh, you learn to appreciate the quiet. is like probably the only thing that I think I could say is that you learn to appreciate those times where you have downtime. Like, and I'm talking about like the little parts of downtime that I found most relaxing was like on a helicopter on my way to Target.
Yeah.
Like I'm sitting there, I'm I'm like I'm with this group of dudes that's ready to just you know
Do violence.
do whatever they have to
Yeah.
to make shit happen for the night. And and you're sitting on that helicopter and things are vibrating and there's noises, but you can't really hear anyone talking, so you're just sitting by yourself, and that was like one of the most relaxing times that I can think of. Like that's when you get down on that helicopter and you pass out for your 30 minutes or whatever before you hear the call and you wake up and you're like, okay, well, it's time to get it on. But you learn to appreciate the time that you have, and it's not very much, but you do learn to appreciate it, and it just becomes part of your process. Like this is your pre-mission process kind of thing is is important. And then you get on the bird, you do all your checks, everything is like the same every time, and it's just muscle memory, dude. And then you get on the bird, and it's like, okay, now this is my time. This is my time that I get to center my thoughts and say a prayer. So I will say this, dude. After that first night in 2013, I prayed on my way out to every single mission. I said a prayer, that we would all make it home safely to our families. And
Yeah.
after that, like we had casualties, like people got messed up, including myself, but every single one of us made it home on those missions. Uh, Maybe not whole, but we made it home.
Let's
Uh,
talk about that seventh deployment, right? Because you wind up getting hurt pretty badly. I mean, you got shot in the back, correct?
it actually, yeah, you could say that, I guess, but actually came in through my arm right here and went through my chest and hit my left shoulder right here. So it
Jesus.
was like, yeah, I got shot in the back, but through the chest. So,
Yeah.
um, like the way that I was standing, kind of, it came in through my arm right here and it hit my collarbone and went in between my second and third ribs, lacerated my right lung, hit my T3 vertebrae, and I had a lamina fracture there. Exposed my spinal cord, it's called the epidural hematoma, from T1 to T8, and then collapsed my left lung partially, and then before it hit my left shoulder blade, which fractured my left scapula.
Were
And
you? I mean, were you awake for all? I mean, like, did that take you out as far as like, did you black out from that, or were you
no,
cognizant for any of that?
the only thing the first thing that I thought was that I felt like I got hit in the head. Like when you get hit
Yeah.
in the head, you kind of see static, I guess, or whatever, like the old TV screens when they had static on there.
Yeah.
Uh, like that, you see the static, and I'm like, man, I just got hit in the head really hard, and I like, I've come like basically, I didn't lose consciousness, I don't think, but I was previously standing in this straddling a ditch, and then the next thing I knew, I was sitting in the ditch, and I don't know what's going on, but it felt like I got hit in the head really hard, and so I told the medic, I said, hey, uh, something's wrong with me. And he said, are you okay? Because they thought like I had shot into the wall, um, because they heard gunshots. They
Right.
thought I had shot into the wall, and they asked if I was okay, and I said, I don't think so. And uh, they asked what was wrong with me, and I said, I think I got shot. And the medic like almost chuckled at me, kind of, like, what do you mean you think you got shot? And uh, I just basically said, man, I can't feel my legs. And they asked if I could climb out of the ditch, but it was like I couldn't. My right collarbone
Yeah.
was just basically a soup sandwich. My whole right shoulder was a soup sandwich. So they asked if I could climb out of the ditch. I said no. They said, we'll get you here in a second. So they basically deconflicted and was able to grab me and pull me out of the ditch. And when they first pulled me up, it was like I didn't have anything below my collarbones. It was the craziest feeling that I couldn't really feel anything, but I could just feel like I was so wobbly because I didn't have any core stability at all. I was completely shut down from my collarbones
Wow.
down. And I remember one of the assistant team leader there, that was on our team. He started cracking jokes, and basically I was like, "Oh, that's okay. I'll be back in a couple weeks. I'm not going anywhere." That was not accurate at all. But they ended up medevacing me. It was a really kind of a weird situation on the ground. We had taken contact. One of the Afghans had gotten shot in the plate by this barricaded shooter, and so when I got shot, like it was just a really tough situation. But when I got shot, it was the way that everything happened. It was just ended up being a perfect situation for me to survive, and also, uh, but it wasn't like that on the ground. Like I didn't get medevac for almost 2 hours. It was like an hour and 45 minutes where I finally got medevaced with a double lung collapse and internal bleeding and I got a chest tube in a field out there that my medic gave me. He just crushed it, absolutely crushed it. And he knew, like my medic said that he knew that if unless something else happened on the flight, or whatever, that I was going to be okay.
Good.
And that just he really crushed it, man. He did an awesome job taking care of me and getting me the care that I needed, man.
So, what does that recovery timeline look like? Because I mean, you were pretty much told you were never going to walk again, right?
They didn't ever want to tell me that I wouldn't walk again. They had ways to know if I had a connection. They just didn't know, like, they couldn't tell. I mean, spinal cord injuries are just so
Yeah.
weird. So they didn't want to tell me that I was never going to walk again, but they did tell me that the odds were not necessarily in my favor. And I mean, that's kind of a hard one to swallow. Uh, and initially, I woke up, 5 days later in launch duel with a tube down my throat. Can't even cough because I have like no abdominal muscles. I can't clear my lungs, and I had all kinds of junk in my lungs. So they had to like force this rod down my throat to cause me to heave, to cough. And once that finally came out and I was able to talk, one of the chaplains came up to me and asked if he could pray with me. And I wasn't necessarily. I mean, I was raised in the Mormon LDS religion and kind of against everything under the sun. And but I still had like a specific faith about me. I mean, I stopped going to church when I was about 16 or 17 because of some personal stuff. And but I didn't necessarily disagree with their religion. I just have my own feelings about it. And
Yeah.
I've prayed about it a lot, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion. But I looked at this chaplain and I said to him, like, do you think it'll help? And he said it won't hurt. And I said, you're not wrong. And that's kind of like the last time I allowed myself to feel sorry for my situation. And I will tell you, man, like about a day or two later, I started moving my toe. And then that was all I needed, man. Like, I had a connection. I knew that I had a connection to my feet from my brain, and that me walking again was a serious possibility. So after that, they prepped me up for transport from launch school to Walter Reed, and I flew from Germany. I had a dedicated medical team, a 5-person medical team that transported me the whole way from launch school to Walter Reed. I used up all of their ketamine that they have, which looking back on it now, like as I've gone down, we'll get there, but
Yeah.
I've really been looking at alternative medicines for mental health standpoint from a mental health standpoint. So I did eventually get into ketamine infusions to help with chronic pain and mental health, and that I really appreciate the time that I had flying back from launch duel with that medicine specifically, because it allowed me to be a free thinker and not focus on the fact that I was absolutely miserable. I do remember flying back on the plane uh, from Ramstein to Andrews Air Base, but I remember just being on the flight. I don't know how long we were flying or when we were going to land, and I couldn't really, since I had no like abdominal core strength, like it was hard for me to like project my voice to even talk to my medical team. But I just remembered like closing my eyes and just telling myself to be strong. Like, just be strong, man. It was the only thing I
Yeah.
could think of to say, but I was so fucking miserable, and it just really, really sucked being on that
Yeah.
plane. In pain, and my arm, uh, my right collarbone was broken still. I didn't have the hardware in there that I have now, but the way that I was sitting, I was like on a litter, and I'm a big dude, I was 240 pounds when I got shot, and litters are made for like these 150-pound dudes, that are not nearly as wide as me, and so like my arm is just hanging off of this litter for like 8 hours, and I'm like, I'm having a hard time trying to communicate with my team to say like, hey, can you help me like put my arm up here so I can relax it, because it's
Yeah.
just dangling. It's dangling off this litter, and it really, really sucks. But it was an interesting flight, man. And then I really am a proponent for the ketamine therapy that I did receive on that flight. I feel like you got to pay for that stuff now.
All right, man. So, now you're at Walter Reed, after a hell of a flight, right? And so what happens next for you?
So yeah, so I get to Walter Reed, and the first thing I want to do is basically not allow me to stay horizontal in my bed. They want me to get up for physical therapy and all this stuff, and I'm usually like pretty all about that. It's not the first time I've done physical therapy since I've been there, but one day they come into my room. They said, "Hey, we got to get you up." And I said, "I don't feel like it." They said, "We understand, but we hear that all the time. We have to get you up anyways." And I said, all right, let's do this. So they put this brace on me, and it's called a TLSO brace. And it's has a front plate and a back plate. Comes up and has this like girdle that goes underneath my chin, and then this back plate that kind of went around the back of my head, and they velcroed together. So I couldn't move my neck. But as they started putting this thing on me, my vision just started, going. And I basically told them that I can't see anything, I can't breathe, and they ripped that thing off of me. I started going into what they call an autonomic dysphylaxia episode. So I basically like my heart, so my blood pressure dropped to like 70 over 35. Heart rate jumped up to 140 beats per minute. I lost like 2 degrees of core temperature immediately, and uh, it was just, and I came to the realization that after the fact, I came to the realization that it was opiates that they were giving me that were causing my bowels to back up, and it was creating stress on my organs. It had already been through a lot.
Yeah.
And so I basically told them, hey, no more opiates. I asked for more ketamine, and they said, that's a funny joke. they weren't going to give me more ketamine. But I asked for, I was said, fine, give me Tylenol then. So 2.5 weeks after this bullet goes through my chest, I'm taking Tylenol for pain. So that's kind of like I was really, it really sucked. I was in a ton of pain. But I was able to kind of overcome that by uh with the I was taking uh muscle relaxers. They were
Yeah.
helping with with spasms and everything. As things started waking back up, uh my body would be sending signals to my brain, and the brain, by the time it would get to my brain, it would be a little bit distorted. So muscles would spasm and twitch and do weird things that they because the signals were not clear.
Right.
Right. So I'm thinking about it like if you think about the nerve, like the transfer information going through your nerves. Think about it like with a spinal cord injury, you're sitting in like rush hour traffic in Atlanta. You know, you're just not going anywhere. You know, it's just like really slow moving, which is the case with me because I have an incomplete spinal cord injury. So I'm just like slowly, that traffic is slowly moving, and the information is still flowing, but it's going very slow. Like the more you work on those pathways, the more the cars will get off of the exits, and it'll allow free movement of the traffic to flow and information to flow through your nerves. So that's kind of like the end state that we're looking for. And anyways, so I get transferred down to Tampa where I started my physical therapy a little bit after that, and was able to find sub relief through some of the medications that I was down on it that I was taking down there. But I really wanted to get away from taking the medications. You know, like I didn't want to be reliant on medication for the rest of my life.
Yeah, of
So
course.
kind of like fast forward a little bit, I was able to complete my physical goals down in Tampa. I did a triathlon. I did a 5K, a 10K, triathlon sprint, which was a quarter-mile swim, 11-mile bike, and a 3.1-mile walk that I did completely unassisted. And this was in October of 20 when I got shot in July of 19. So just over a year and some change after I got shot. I did a triathlon sprint, which was
You realize most people who haven't been shot haven't done that, right? Just to put that
I
out there.
I never anticipated doing a triathlon ever in my life. It was not something that I had any ambition to ever do. But when this situation presented itself to me, that I really felt like that was, and with COVID and everything too. Like my initial goal was to be able to run a mile, you know, without stopping, and just with COVID and uh, without access to the hospital and the specific treatments that they had in the hospital for physical therapy and everything. Like they had a treadmill pool that was awesome. And I mean, I was like just talking with my wife the other day about getting like an endless pool, but it's like, man, they're only 50 grand, you know. So maybe, maybe one of these days I can get myself an endless pool or something, or maybe we could work something out like that. But I think that like I really need to. I would love to be able to run like that, and I think that's the best way for me
Yeah.
to build up that base. Anyways, but so without access to those kinds of therapies, like I kind of was just limited to like TheraBands, 5 pound weights or 10 pound weights, whatever I had in my apartment, because they closed down the gym and everything for COVID. So I had to reassess my physical goals because I did try running. I got my quarter mile time down to like 2.5, 3 minutes. Um, but after that, it was like I was down for the whole day because
Yeah.
when I had dislocated my sacrum as a previous injury in 2016, but I lost all my pelvic floor and all my core strength, so that allowed that joint to like just flop around and kind of do whatever and wanted. And so like I had all this pain in my lower back, at the that I couldn't feel at the time, that I ended up feeling later. It just put me down for like 2 days. So I realized that I couldn't run like I wanted to without building up slowly. And so I kind of just decided that a triathlon sprint would be a better physical goal for me, because it was lower impact and I don't know, it was a little bit more attainable and just a little bit better on my body. But I felt that if I could do something like that, then I was a point physically, then I would be at a point physically um, that I could come home. Basically transition back to North Carolina, and that satisfied my physical goals for being down there. So once I got back from once I completed the triathlon sprint, I transitioned back to North Carolina, and once I decided I was at a point physically uh, that was sustainable, I decided it was time to address my mental health.
Yeah.
So I got back, and that's kind of when I started my process of transitioning out of the military. Um, and eventually I did end up medically retiring in May of 22. But first up, it was, like I really wanted to address my mental health. Like I told you before that I I turned to drinking after
Yeah.
after all that stuff, and basically like pickled my body with alcohol for years. And drinking, I don't think was new to me. Drinking wasn't new to me before that first incident. It was just kind of like what we did to deal with our shit.
It's it's interesting you say that because I just did an interview with Jeff Truax for After the Long Walk,
Yeah,
and we
love
literally
Jeff.
spent 15 minutes talking about like that's what we did. Like you deployed and you drank and you said shit when you were drunk, and then you're like, we're never gonna talk about this again, and then you did it again, and it was like a
Right,
rinse, wash, repeat. And there was a lot
right.
of alcohol use and probably abuse in the career field. And
Yeah,
so let's talk about like you're out and you've decided to make this transition, to work on your mental health. What do you find that worked for you, man?
yeah. So, like I said, that initially, like I really, I really started doing my research, on some stuff. I went on a retreat and I met some guys that had really um, spoke highly of psychedelics, and that they had really good, uh, they made a lot of progress mentally with ketamine infusions, ketamine infusion therapy. So, like, I started looking into this and kind of researching and uh, spitting myself up on this process, and what it kind of looks like. And because I mean, like I said, I was raised Mormon, against everything, and uh, I mean, that didn't stop me from drinking alcohol, but that was just what was acceptable, man. Like I was a dare kid
Yeah.
in the '90s, and I just uh, was against drugs. Like
Yeah.
I never did drugs growing up at all. You know, ever. But alcohol was for sale in the store, dude. It couldn't be that bad. So I figured that that's just what we knew, and that's what was acceptable. So that's what we stuck with. And so I wanted to research this stuff. I started researching this stuff, man. And the more I researched, the more I found that I've been lied to my whole life. So I uh, I basically started looking around at trying to figure out like where like I could go and do ceremonies like through nonprofits and try to find some way of like healing, So I found a nonprofit that helped pay for my ketamine infusions, and from that, I still drank, but it was like I even so like back before I got shot, I I made this change. I had something. I went through a period of darkness, and I was drinking a lot. And one of my uh, work associates, really awesome dude, man. Alex Bald.
Yeah, very well.
He came up and talked to me, and he said, like, hey man, uh, people are worried about you. Like your behavior, people are worried about you. Like I just feel like he just said that he felt like he needed to say something to me, and that I always told my wife that I would stop drinking when it affected the job. Come to find out, I mean, it was affecting me the whole time, but no one really wanted to talk to me about it. But Alex did talk to me about it,
I
and
love him, man.
dude, he's an awesome guy. I love him to death, and
I work with him
uh,
right now. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I'm extremely thankful that he talked to me, man. So ever since then, it was like it wasn't like I cut out alcohol completely, but I knew that it's something needed to change. So I limited myself to one drink at a time. Like one drink a day or whatever. And it was like that after I got shot until I started this process for mental health support. So
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I'll come home and drink a drink every day. Like just one drink. It's no big deal. It was very, very seldom I ever had more than one drink. Um, but once I started this kind of process, I found like, especially with the ketamine infusions, like it, I was able to navigate that, in a way that was like so profound to me that when I came home after my first ketamine infusion, I, and my wife brought this up to me, and I didn't even realize it. It was just so like natural to me. But she said that when I came home from my ketamine infusion, she noticed that I had no desire to drink whatsoever at all. So much to the fact that like even still to this day, like if I'm out and I see someone take a shot of liquor, or even if I was watching a TV show or something and someone took a shot of liquor on a TV show, it would make me sick to my stomach.
Wow.
Like that is how profound this was. I mean, I still drink, but I don't drink liquor. I don't have no desire to drink liquor. I have no desire to even be intoxicated. I'll have a beer or two beers or whatever, and I know that I don't ever want to drink more than that,
Yeah.
or I don't
That's
I
huge.
know. I mean, I might drink more than that, but I know that I will never get carried away like I did before. You know, I found myself, like mixing a drink and taking a sip of it and just being like, ugh, and just dumping it down the drain. And old Jeff would
Yeah.
just chug that because it's like, this tastes gross, but I need it in my body, because it's
Yeah.
doing, serving some
I, I,
function.
yeah, I think
But
anybody that's listening to this that has served in the military and been around, I don't want to say an alcohol culture, but in alcohol culture, like it's exactly what you're talking about. And so, like, how profound it is to say that you couldn't even watch somebody take a shot on TV after doing ketamine. Like, that's wild, right? I mean, that's just it's so counter to a lot of alcohol culture in the military, you know,
right,
uh, which
but
is ingrained in us.
absolutely. And the thing about like this whole process, dude, the thing about it though is that there's a lot that goes into it. Like there's a lot of work that goes into this stuff. Man, it's like when you're going into these, like when I started my ketamine infusions, like typically some places they have guided ketamine therapies, where you'll take the medicine and they basically have a therapist in there talking to you and helping you navigate through these hard situations that you've been through in your life. I didn't have that opportunity, so like I really had to research and figure out like what I was doing prior to even going in there, because I didn't have someone sitting there with me. It was just me in a room by myself, just navigating all this on my own. So once I kind of understood that, I was able to like really, um, I was able to really do a lot of work, man,
Yeah.
and kind of uh, explore some of those things that I've really been neglecting to deal with my entire life. So,
Yeah.
and that kind of like leaning forward with that, like I had not just with ketamine, but like looking into other plant medicines that help with mental health, and the science is there. Like there's studies with mushrooms and MDMA and LSD and all these things that I basically have been lied to about my entire life, because either the information wasn't there, or they just uh, they fudged the um,
The
the te-
effects and how it could benefit
no,
you.
no, they ended up like putting out a study that was like inaccurate.
Yeah.
So they put out these inaccurate studies, and basically like there was no information out there, so people are like, oh, this is what's up. Like acid doesn't burn holes in your brain. Like it's not bad. It's like the more I researched it, the more I realized that there's health benefits to this stuff, man. And it's like, and it can help you, if you are able to put in the work. So like the
Yeah.
more I started researching this stuff, the more I found myself asking, why not? Why not try this stuff? Like, and that since I've started this process for my mental health, I found that I'm drinking less. I quit smoking, or not. I never smoked. I did tobacco for like 15 years. I quit cold turkey tobacco, like it was no big deal. Um, I've lost weight. I'm down to like 205 pounds, 210 pounds. So I've lost nearly 30, 35, 40 pounds almost, and I've become more aware of what I'm putting in my body. I started um, doing exercises that help get my body moving. I started looking breathwork exercises, and all of this kind of like, the more I started looking into this stuff, the more I found myself being around people that had like-minded uh, ideas, and that were looking basically for the same kind of relief in
Yeah.
life. And it's not just from the military. Like people go through stuff everywhere. Everyone goes through stuff. Not just people in the military, but people in the military. They sign up for it, for one, and two, they know that it's coming. They know that they're going to expect, they expect to deal with something like that in the future. Like if you're talking about a regular civilian, like, and you drive past a car accident and you see a dead body, that affects you differently, because you have, for one, you're not expecting it. You don't have the mental like fortitude to be able to deal with that, um, and it's also based on the experience that you have previous to that event.
Yeah.
Uh, so potentially like these situations that us in the military go through on a daily basis, and that's just our baseline kind of thing. So um, civilians, it's a completely different uh, aspect to them. It's a completely different thing for them.
Would
So
you would you do it all again, man? I mean, we know we're talking about military trauma and behavioral health, and looking back on everything, like you've been through a lot of shit in your life and in the military. Uh, would you join the army all over again, knowing what you know now?
I absolutely would, man. I really, I feel that the military afforded me an opportunity that I wouldn't have been able to find otherwise. It pushed me mentally and physically. I was able to uh, find very deep, meaningful relationships with people um, that I worked with. Like that. It was such an incredible opportunity for me, and
Yeah.
I think that it can be for other people too if they want it. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I agree, man. I think it's I haven't been through literally a quarter of what you've been through. Um, but I think it's the best choice I've ever made. Uh, it's, dude, you got a story, man. And if I can have you back sometime to talk strictly behavioral health and mental health, I'd love to do that, man, because you've had a journey and continue to have a journey on the behavioral health piece, man. Um, any parting shots, man?
I will say that I'm down to come back and talk about mental health, but I would encourage people to look into Heroic Hearts Project. We talked about that before, but and we could talk about it more. But I had a really awesome experience down. I went to Peru and did ayahuasca ceremony with through Heroic Hearts, which is this is their shirt,
Yeah,
and it was a beautiful experience for me, man. And I learned a lot about myself, and I had a lot. I learned that I had a long way to go when it comes to mental health, and I have a lot of stuff to work on. But it definitely gave me a good direction of which way to go. And I will say that one of the most profound things that I maybe might have learned uh, from that experience was that I what I mentioned earlier. What was when the situation behind when I got shot is sensitive. I did get shot by an American, and that is irrelevant to me at this point. But in my ceremony down in Peru, uh, and like the last time I talked to this guy, we left on like uncertain terms, I guess, not necessarily, like we were fine. Everything was fine. But when I was down there in Peru, that I felt that so strongly that I needed to reach out to this guy and thank him for shooting me because, um, without that piece of the puzzle, it may have taken me so much longer to find this path that I feel so passionately about. And a lot of people might look at me and be like, that's weird. How could you possibly be thankful for this dude that almost killed you? And really, that's irrelevant to me, but I am. I think that I feel like I've reached out and I've tried to get in contact with him and I can't. I'm having a hard time getting in contact with him, but I'm still trying to figure out how to say thank you to him because I believe that he put me in the position to be able to grow and learn. And maybe I would have found it without him, but I can 100% say that he thrust me into um, this realm of being able to figure this out on my own, and I am extremely thankful for that. And thankful for Heroic Hearts Project, and thank you for having me on today, and to be
yeah,
able to
man.
share.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, dude, you got a hell of a story, man, and I appreciate you taking the time to come and sit down and talk with me so other people can watch and hear your story. And you got to I know I've said it before, man, you got a hell of a story, but these are the stories that people need to hear, right? They need to hear not just when we talk about combat and all the stuff that people get to see in Hollywood movies, but also what comes after. What comes after with the behavioral health piece and all of that. So thank you for taking the time to talk with me. Thank you for being so open about everything. I would love to talk to you again strictly on the behavioral health piece because it's an absolutely wild and fascinating story, brother. So, hey
Absolutely,
man, I
man.
wish you all the best, and I look forward to bumping into you down the road. All right,
Sounds good, man. Can't wait to see you again.
can't wait to see you, brother.
All right, take it easy.